Okay, so today we're going to try to calculate an income tax problem. Now, from our textbook, that's section 8.2, income tax. And I'm kind of going back a little bit from where this class is right now because I think there's still some confusion about doing these calculations. And this is a long calculation. There's a lot to this calculation, so I think it's good to review, especially because we do have a test coming up and we're kind of moving towards that date. Okay, so when I first look at this problem, this problem statement in the upper left is pretty typical of the way that we'll be asking this question. And so we're told our filing status, we're given our gross income, our adjustments, our deductions, and that there's no tax credit. And then the implication is that we're supposed to find out how much tax does this person owe. And I say this person because the filing status is single, which implies that it's a single individual. All right, well, that filing status single, that immediately tells me that of this huge table that I've been given for the 2021 marginal tax rates, that I'm actually only interested in this first column. And so already I've narrowed down, and I'm going to ignore the rest of that table except for, the information immediately to the left there that tells me what tax bracket I'm in. It tells me the percentage tax bracket I'm in for those values. So that the filing status single, that basically tells me to zoom in on that column of my tax bracket. Then they give me this gross income, adjustments, and deductions. From that, so from these three, I need to calculate my taxable income. So I need to calculate, go away AI, there we go, calculate my taxable income. It's a fairly straightforward process, but there's a couple of pieces to it and a couple of places where we can take wrong turns. And so my taxable income will tell me what tax bracket I'm in and will tell me how much money I'm paying for each of those tax brackets. Now, to calculate that taxable income, I'm just going to call it TI. Taxable income is going to equal my gross income and then that will be minus my adjustments and then minus my deductions. The adjustments are literally as straightforward, and the gross income. Gross income is every dollar that you have made. And so that individual made $70,000 that year. And so $70,000 goes for my gross income there. So my TI here, not II, TI, there we go, is going to equal 70,000 minus 7,500. And then I've got to figure out what to do with the deductions. And what we have to do is we have to sum up the itemized deductions here. And we have to compare them to the standard deduction down here and figure out which one's larger. And estimation skills, I can already tell you that the $12,550 is going to be bigger than these itemized deductions. But we still ought to go ahead and type out and find out what the number is, make sure that we're correct about that. 6,800 plus 2,500 plus 1,200 is going to give me 10,500. And it's not even close. So got nearly, over $2,000 more. So we take the standard deduction because the standard deduction is greater than the itemized deductions. And so then we subtract the 12,550. And so my taxable income here, that's going to be 70,000 minus 7,500 minus 12,550. And that gives me a taxable income of $49,950. Okay, what do we do with that taxable income of $49,950? So that is, the way I like to think about that is that's the pile of cash that I have. And so I kind of like to draw piles of cash in green. You can use whatever color you like. But I like to think of piles of cash in terms of green. And so I like to think that I have a pile of cash here register in that lower left corner, and that my pile of cash is $49,950 tall. Now, in that pile of cash, I have different tax rates. Different dollars in that pile of cash get taxed at different rates. And so what I do is I say, okay, well, my $49,950, it's more than the $99,550. It's more than the $40,525. But it's not more than the $86,375. So it lives between that $40,526 and that $86,375. And that means that I'm in the 22% tax bracket. And so that you can translate I've got $49,950 in taxable income. That places me in the 22% tax bracket. Okay, so what in the world does that mean? Well, the way I like to think of it is I like to take that pile of cash that I drew there, and I like to put a bar here about a fifth of the way up, and call that level my $9,950. Because everything at or below that value, every dollar I've earned at or below that value, gets taxed at a rate of 10%. Okay, now somewhere about 4/5 of the way up here, I want to put another bar. And I want to call that bar $40,525. We're talking about dollars, we should put a dollar sign in. All right, and so now, and this is the tricky part, I'm not taxing everything from the bottom up at 12%, right? Because this is my 12% tax bracket. I'm only taxing the stuff between the $99.50 and the $45.25 at that higher tax rate, the 12%. I still only pay 10% on the $99.50. I'm only paying the 12% on everything I made above the $99.50 that's still under that $40,525. You can probably see where this is going. We now have a 22% tax rate, and it's on everything above the $40,525. And so to find the total amount of tax that this person owes, I need to calculate three values and combine them. I need to calculate 10% on the amount of money that I've shaded in black. I need to calculate 12% of the amount of money I've shaded in blue. And I need to calculate 22% of the amount of money I've shaded in purple. And so I kind of have my $0 down here at the bottom, because I started at the bottom with $0. Okay, well, to calculate 10% of $99.50, it's literally just going to be 0.1 times $99.50, right? Because I convert that percentage to a ratio. By converting that percentage to a ratio, I divide by 100. Okay, that's 10% of my $99.50. Now I need 12%, so 0.12, and it's all the money between $99.50 and the $45.25. Well, that's going to be $45.25 minus the $99.50. And that will give me all of the money between those two values. I multiply that by 12%. We'll go ahead and take out the implicit multiply there. Okay. For the last bit, for the highest tax bracket, I've got 22%, so 0.22. And then that will be multiplied by that $49,950. And then minus my $45.25. Then what I want to do is I want to add all three of those together, and that'll give me my taxable income. All right, well, let's do that. I'll have 0.1 times $99.50 plus 0.12 times 4525 minus 9950 plus 0.22 times, open parentheses is very important there, otherwise it only multiplies by the first value, 49,950 minus my 4525. And when I hit enter, it gives me the entire tax owed. And that's going to be a total of $6,737.5. And seems like a reasonable value as far as being a percentage somewhere above a 12% average of my 49,000, of my 50,000. So seems like a reasonable answer for this problem. There was no tax credit. This is something I should say because if it pops up in another problem, you should know how to handle this. In this case, there was no tax credit. If there had been a tax credit, this point at the end is where I would subtract it. And so we kind of have a minus $0 here for my tax credit. But, since it's minus $0, we just kind of ignore that in this calculation. But if there had been a tax credit, this is where we would apply it. We would subtract it from that value at the end. One thing I would really like to point out that is confusing from this table, and I really don't like the way this table is laid out because of this particular kind of contradiction, is they talk about up to 99.50, and then they kind of skip a dollar and talk about 99.51 up to 45.25. Completely ignore these values. Those values, as far as the ones with the dollar up, those really should be 99.50 because it's a dividing line. We're not skipping a dollar. You're being taxed on that dollar, so you can't use that value when you're creating these subtractions. So subtractions always have to go back down to the number on the right in this table. It's a very subtle point, but it's important to getting the exact right number. All right. I hope that helps. I hope this helps us understand what we're doing and get more right answers.